And I think, let's see, it takes a second. Yes, we are recording. All right. And I'm going to pull this open and try to rearrange these screens so that I can see you and you can see the thing. Nope. Let's try again. There we go. And I want you to, this is the, nope. PowerPoint. There it is. All right. No, I need to be sharing the screen, don't I? Try again. Share the screen. Y'all could have told me I wasn't sharing. All right. Now, is that better? Can you guys see this now? You guys, can y'all see the screen here? It's not sharing? Huh? It's what? All black? Okay. All right, let me see. There's Destiny. All right. 144. Okay, so let me turn on mine too, and I can see when it comes out. There's Ashley. All right. Let me see what mine looks like to share it. Okay. Mine looks like it's sharing. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, it's sharing now. Okay. All right, so let us slide you guys over here, and we're going to start with our notes. Okay. So again, the chapter is about classification of life. All right. Let's imagine you guys remember when you guys were kids, or some of you did, or at least you know kids who did collect Pokemon cards. Some people like Pokemon cards, or some people collected baseball cards or football cards. You guys know what I'm talking about? Does anybody, you guys know what I'm talking about? I know you guys are too old for Pokemon cards probably, but you know what they are. All right, so what if we had cards like that called trading cards? If we had trading cards, one for every single living thing on the planet. You have these cool little cards. It has a picture of the animal or the plant or whatever it is and some descriptions on the back. Those would be some pretty cool cards. But there would be bajillions of them. Well, there's something in the chat line. Let me see what it is. Okay, I got you, Destiny. Thank you, Princess. All right, so if we had a trading card for every living thing on Earth, that would be bajillions of trading cards. And so one of the first things you would want to do is try to organize them. You would probably, first thing you would do is put animals in one stack and plants in another stack. That makes really good sense. But there are things that aren't animals nor plants. Funguses, like mushrooms, like you put on your pizza, they're not an animal or a plant. Okay, because they're not a plant. I know that they're stuck with the vegetables on the pizza menu, but they are not a plant. Funguses are their own type of thing. They cannot do photosynthesis, so you can't call them a plant. They have to eat their food, but they're not an animal because they have cell walls like a plant cell does. So I'm going to talk about that some more in a minute, but it doesn't fit in either the plant or the animal category. So they made its own category for funguses. They call the categories kingdoms. All right. And there are three other kingdoms. There's, bacteria, little single-celled bacteria. There are two whole kingdoms full of bacteria. And then there's another kingdom called Protist. We're not going to talk about some of those. We'll talk about the first four today. The two bacteria kingdoms and the fungus kingdom and the Protist kingdom. And then, of course, what's left is plants and animals, and that's the stuff we know about. And that's what we'll talk about on the next discussion day. All right, so let's get this started. All right, so this table right here, I'm sure that you guys will see it many, many times. I don't want to full screen it. All right, let me just figure out. There we go. So I still want to be able to see all of y'all so that I can see who's staying in the camera, so I can see who I'm giving credit to. I can tell when y'all have disappeared, and there's about 2, 3 people who have disappeared off your cameras. All right, get yourself back in your cameras for me. Huh? Slightly, yes. It should still have us on one side and the PowerPoint on the other side. Okay. All right. So this table right here, you guys are going to need to know. You're going to actually memorize this table for me. These first two columns only. Okay, this column right here has the name of the kingdoms we're going to learn, and this tells us why that organism is put into that kingdom, what makes them different than the other stuff. The examples, you don't have to memorize the whole set of examples, but you're going to need to know a couple for each one. Okay, you don't have to memorize this third column, but you do need to memorize the first two columns. All right, so when we're talking about this, we have Archebacteria and Eubacteria are the first kingdoms. Now, we know pretty much what a bacteria is. Okay, it's a tiny little microorganism. But the thing about, remember when you learned about cells in middle school? And one of the first things you remember about a cell is the brain of the cell is the nucleus. The nucleus is the brain cell. Does that sound familiar? You guys remember learning that? The brain of the cell is the nucleus. All right, bacteria don't have a nucleus. They don't even have a nucleus. Their DNA is just thrown around loose in the cell. So every single other kind of cell has a nucleus, like you learned in middle school. They all have a nucleus, but bacteria don't. So we put them off in their own kingdom. Thing about it is, though, within the bacteria, there are, let me put this back up over here. Within the bacteria, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of different kinds. When we got started, we put all of the bacteria in one big bucket. Think of our trading cards. We put all the bacteria trade cards all together in one bucket because they don't have a nucleus, and every single thing else does. But once we looked in the bacteria bucket, we realized we need two separate bacteria buckets. Okay, let me show you this Venn diagram to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so these are the two kinds of bacteria. There's Archebacteria, you see that AH word? Archebacteria and Eubacteria. Archebacteria, does that sound sort of like the word archaeologist? Has anybody heard what an archaeologist is? Archaeologists like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Archaeologists study old stuff and artifacts and ancient cultures. Basically really old stuff. The prefix archa means old. Archebacteria, old bacteria. Now, it's not that it's like old grandpa bacteria walking around with a cane and a grouchy face. No, there are some archebacteria who are just being born right this minute. They're not all old. What we mean by archebacteria is that these are the kind of bacteria that live in situations or in conditions like the old Earth. Do you guys remember what they told you it was like when the Earth first formed? The volcanoes everywhere and the air that didn't have oxygen. It had a whole bunch of other chemicals in it, and it was way too hot, and it was miserable, the old Earth, when the Earth was first being formed. These bacteria like it. These bacteria like it like that. Hot, no oxygen, bad salt. I mean, way too salty. All right, have you ever heard of the people who, they're called adrenaline junkies when we're talking about people. They get on YouTube and they do these amazing stunts, and you never know how they're going to survive, and sometimes they don't. And they're doing this crazy stuff. They call them adrenaline junkies. Do you guys know what I'm talking about, adrenaline junkies, when you see them on YouTube and stuff, doing all sorts of stunts and stuff that could kill just about anybody, and they're doing it just for the fun of it? Adrenaline junkies. They're also called extremophiles because they love extreme sports, they love extreme adventures, extreme. And phile means to love, extremophiles. All right, so these bacteria are also called extremophiles. These bacteria are the extremophiles, meaning they love to live in extreme conditions. Okay, they love to live in extreme conditions where it's way too salty, way too hot, methane instead of oxygen, all sorts of different things, and they just love it. All right. Now, the eubacteria, the EU part means true. EU means true. These are the true bacteria. These are the ones that are found everywhere. These are the ones crawling all over your computer right now, all over your skin, in your intestines, on your papers, on your pencils. They're everywhere and they're creepy. Eubacteria. These are the true bacteria. These are the ones found everywhere. All right. They're found, when the ones who are in our intestines help us get food and vitamins. They get the nutrients we need. They actually work to help us, but they also can cause diseases. So you got good ones and you got bad ones. So when we're looking at our Venn diagram between the two bacteria kingdoms, neither one of them has a nucleus. Do you see this word prokaryotic? Remember we said that's what separated, we said of all of the trading cards, everything else has a nucleus. These bacteria don't have a nucleus. That's why we took them apart to begin with. The word prokaryotic here, that means no nucleus. Prokaryotic. Remember, the amoeba sisters were working with that yesterday, I think. Prokaryotic means no nucleus. Bacteria don't have nucleus. All right, they're all single-celled, okay? And some of them can be autotrophic and some of them can be heterotrophic. You also saw this in the movie yesterday. Autotrophic means they can do photosynthesis like a plant can, or they can feed themselves some other way. They might do chemosynthesis, but they don't need to eat. They can make their own food. Heterotrophic means that they're going to have to eat something, okay? Oh, hold on. Sorry, got too hot. All right, so with this Y-looking diagram we have right here. All right, so do you see this, the stuff pulled off on this side, the eukaryotes? These are the ones that have the nucleus. They all have a nucleus. And then we have the other two. We have the archa domain and the bacteria domain. And so these are the two kingdoms. The archa kingdom is actually closer to us. It's actually close. This is us over here. This is where the animals are, the plants, the funguses, and those protists I was talking about. They all belong right here. And the archa is closer to us. So what they believe is, you know how they talk about how possibly that life evolved from these single little organisms and worked their way up. The first single organisms were Archebacteria, these extremophiles. That's why they're closer related to us. All right. So here's what the bacteria do for us. Almost all of them are going to break down remains and waste and return the nutrients to the soil. They act as decomposers. Another thing that the bacteria do is with nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrogen is incredibly important because you know how DNA, you know that DNA ladder? All right. Both sides of every step on the ladder takes a nitrogen. So the nitrogen here and the nitrogen here on every single step of the DNA ladder. And those DNA ladders are incredibly long, and there's a whole bunch of them in every single cell. And there's trillions and trillions of cells in a body. That's a lot of nitrogen. The bacteria's job is to take nitrogen from the air and turn it solid so that the bodies can use it. So we wouldn't have that nitrogen for our bodies if we didn't have the bacteria to make it ready for us. So that's one of the other things that they do for us. They help us make the nitrogen that helps us with the protein and genetic material. That's the DNA. They also help us to digest our food. In our intestines, they will help to break down certain foods, give us certain nutrients and vitamins from our foods. All right, so they actually work to help us when some of the bacteria are in our intestines, but sometimes they also cause disease. So they have, you know, give and take. All right, so what we have here is when I said everything that has a nucleus, that's all of these guys. Can you see my mouse moving around? All of these guys have a nucleus. They all belong to the kingdom called Eukarya. That carry part means nucleus. EU, true. I told you EU means true, right? True nucleus. Okay, so these guys have a nucleus. All of these guys have a nucleus. Now, these bacteria, they don't have a nucleus, so you call them prokarya. Pro means before. There's the domain bacteria. Those are the plain ones, the common ones. These are the eubacteria. And then the archebacteria, that's the extremophiles. Okay, so let's move on to the next one we have coming up is funguses. But let's look at our table first. All right, so the archebacteria, those are the single-celled, every bacteria is. They do not have a nucleus. No bacteria does. They reproduce by fission. Okay, dividing in half. Think about the DNA. So I'm going to twist my fingers up. That's DNA. Okay, like it looks sort of twisted. Okay, so you start off with a bacteria. It copies its DNA, and then it just splits into 2 bacteria. Okay, so you don't need most everything else needs a male and a female part. Bacteria just splits itself in half, makes a copy of the DNA and splits. So that's called reproducing by fission. That's what we mean by dividing in half. And the Archebacteria here is also found in harsh environments. These are our extreme files. The Eubacteria, these are the true bacteria. They are single-celled. Every bacteria is. They have no nucleus. No bacteria does. They do reproduce by dividing in half. Those first 3 things are the same for both the bacteria. The bacteria, though, are the ones that are incredibly common. These are the everywhere bacteria. Now, let's move on to funguses. Let me take one more second to breathe. Hold on. Okay. All right. So, how do we tell a fungus from everything else? Remember that we're trying to take all of our trading cards and find the right box to put them in. All right. So, everything that's going in the fungus box, how do we be sure what we need is going in the fungus box? Hang on, there's something in the chat line. Let's see what it is. I got that one already. Okay. Nope. Okay, I don't know what else it is. Okay. All right. All right. Oh, wait, there was something else. My computer's just lagging. Hang on. Okay, Bailey, I got you, babe. All right. Not sure why. Okay. That's smart. If I leave it like that, then I can see that and see this at the same time. And okay, that works. Handy dandy. I just found a new trick. Okay, so when we're deciding what box to put all of our trading cards in, how do we decide that something goes in the fungus box? Okay, first, fungus is not a plant nor an animal. It does have a nucleus, so it's not going in the box with the bacteria. It does have a nucleus. So then we're going to, it does have cell walls. Now, remember when you learned about plant cells and animal cells? Okay, animal cells look like a big balloon filled with hair gel and then stuff inside of it. And the plant cells look like a box. Do you remember learning that? That box around the plant cells. Okay, if you try to take a bunch of animal cells, I mean, that box is called the cell wall. That's what I'm trying to say. If you take a whole bunch of animal cells that look like a balloon and you try to stack them up on top of each other, they're going to fall. But if you take those plant cells with that box, you could stack them very easily. Well, that's exactly what the cell wall is for. It's for support. And funguses also have a cell wall, just like a plant does. Funguses have a rigid cell wall for support. Now they have a cell wall like a plant does, but they don't do photosynthesis. That's why they can't be a plant. They have a cell wall like a plant does, but they can't do photosynthesis, so they can't be a plant. So they have to have their own category. So the way that the funguses are made is that they look like sort of like this. Now I have a bigger picture here for you. Let me roll down to the bigger picture. Here we go. All right, so this root type stuff in the fungus is called mycelium, and it's made of tiny little straw-like things called hyphae. All right. This mushroom part is where they actually make their spores. Now, spores are sort of like seeds. Are you guys listening good? Spores are sort of like seeds. Within a spore, you have the male part and the female part that's going to be the new fungus. Spores and seeds are kind of the same thing, except seeds are cooler. Seeds are a little bit more evolutionary advanced. Not only do you just have the male part and the female part, but you also have it's encased in a coating that helps to protect the baby embryo. All right, so seeds have a coating around them. The spore is just the male and the female part. And the problem with the spore is that they can dry out really easy. They can get crushed, they can get crumbled, they don't last very long. So mushrooms reproduce with spores. So you put the male and the female part and you just hope for the best. Seeds, when we get to plants, seeds have the male and female part, but it's enclosed in a case that has stuff to let the baby plant begin to grow. So the mushroom part of the mushroom, all right, the mushroom part of the mushroom, that's where the spores are made. So the mushroom is for reproduction, but the mushroom part only shows sometimes, but the rest of the fungus is there all the time, growing and living and eating. Remember that mushrooms cannot do photosynthesis. Funguses can't do photosynthesis. So let me show you how they eat instead. They don't have a mouth. That's weird. They don't have a mouth. So how is a mushroom going to eat? Well, let me show you. All right, these hyphae right here are hollow like a straw. And you know in your stomach you have that stomach acid that helps you break down food, right? So what the funguses do is they take that stomach acid and send it out through the straws. The hyphae are like straws. Send it out through the straws, and it starts to break down the log or whatever it's living on. Remember, because that's what the mushrooms do. They break down dead stuff. So it could be either a dead organism or a dead tree or a dead anything. Sorry. So the mushrooms are trying to break down something. And so they send out the digestive juice into whatever it is they're living on, and it starts to break it down. Once it starts to break it down, they slurp it back up through that straw hyphae. And that's how they eat. They spit out digestive juice and it breaks down the log that they're living on, and then they slurp it back up later, which is, good and gross. Okay, but that's how they eat. And that's why mushrooms are not a plant. They have to eat. All right. So let's see what's next. Mushrooms and funguses in general are great for food. That on this side, that's what we have here. Of course, we know a lot of people love to have mushrooms on their pizza. This is blue cheese, which looks like it's ruined, but it's not. It's blue cheese on purpose because that fungus in there, that mold, gives it its extra flavor. This meat also has a mold in it on purpose. And then bread, of course, we talked about bread in your active reading. Because funguses have to eat, right? Yeast is a type of fungus. Yeast is the only single-celled fungus. Remember, the bacteria are all single-celled and there's no multicellular? With funguses, you have the one yeast that's single-celled. Almost all the rest of the funguses are multicellular. All right, but that yeast that people put in bread, when you eat something, the reason you breathe out carbon dioxide, which is killing me right now, that's what is suffocating me right now, stuck in my mask. All right, when you breathe out carbon dioxide, that comes from the digestion of your food. So because funguses have to eat, and what they do when bakers put the fungus in the dough, the yeast starts to eat the sugar in the dough. And because it's eating the sugar, it's going to put off carbon dioxide too, just like you do. It's eating, you're eating, we both put off carbon dioxide. Well, that carbon dioxide will start to make the bread rise because it's a gas. Okay, it will start to swell up like a balloon, the bread. And so that's how yeast will make the bread rise. Now, that's all good funguses. There's also plenty of bad ones. That is athlete's foot. And it's gross. That's why I made the picture as small as possible. But it is, funguses can be bad as well. Okay. All right. So let's look at our table again. Is this as big as it'll go? All right. Let me put this there. All right. So we did the Archebacteria. Those are the extremophiles. Bacteria, single-celled, no nucleus. Extremophiles. Eubacteria. It's a bacteria, no nucleus, single-celled, but these are the common ones that are everywhere. So Archebacteria, extremophile. Eubacteria, everywhere. Funguses, not a plant nor an animal. They have cell walls, but they consume their food. All right. And there's some single-celled, but most are multi-celled. All right. Now we're moving down to Protist. Protist is the next category. And think about when you are categorizing your trading cards. All right, you got your animal box where you're putting those animal trading cards. You have the plant box where you're putting the plant trading cards. You now know that you have the bacteria cards. And it looks like we're going to be starting the Protist on the next discussion day. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and we'll do the Protist on the next one. Don't go anywhere. I'm just stopping the video.